Tonight on Let It Rip.
Intentionally targeting civilians is a war crime. After all the destruction of the past 3 weeks, I find it difficult to conclude that the Russians are doing otherwise.
U.S. officials label Vladimir Putin a war criminal as his troops bomb theaters, daycare centers, and even hospitals. But for
martial law, because if you're on the street after curfew, you could be suspected as being a Russian saboteur, and that's very real.
He's a Detroit journalist who spent much of the last decade living in Ukraine. How he's covering the Russian invasion while also trying to get innocent people to safety. Time to Let It Rip. We begin tonight with Terrell Jermaine Starr, a man born and raised in Detroit who's been reporting from Ukraine since before the Russian invasion began. I spoke to him at 4 a.m. this morning as the bombs and missiles continue to fall. The sound, the fury, the death and destruction. This is what the Ukrainian people and reporter Terrell Starr have been facing every day and night for the past 3 weeks.
I've seen them target military facilities. Like I said, I witnessed a strike. And I also reported from the ground of a residential building where it struck civilians, where there was no military installments in sight. So the Russians are absolutely targeting civilian locations, and they're doing so because they just want to bring psychological warfare, and they just want to be cruel. I mean, the cruelty of all this is the point.
For his own safety, we won't reveal exactly where he is, but we can tell you he's been crisscrossing Ukraine between the capital city of Kyiv and the major city of Lviv to the west. But in addition to simply reporting on the war, Starr has risked his own life, helping to transport refugees. At one point, helping a woman with cancer get to safety and medical care.
This woman, her story is that leading up to the war, they asked her to leave because she was taking up space for people who would be injured during the war. And so they asked her to leave. And so I happened to make a call out on my social media saying, hey, I need help with this particular person. And a guy from New Jersey who lives in Lithuania responded. And then he said, all you gotta do is get her to Lviv. Now that trip from Kiev, just to let you know, this is a huge country. It covers literally Kiev, Ukraine. It can stretch from New York, where I currently live, my new home, to my hometown of Detroit. That's how big Ukraine is. It is a humongous country. And so we had to get her from Lviv all the way from Kiev all the way to Lviv. That trip ordinarily would take about 7 hours. If you're on the road, maybe 8 hours or so. That trip for us took a day and a half. And it's because you go through dozens of checkpoints in order to get through. And then also, certain roads are cut off because there are certain areas that surround Kiev where Russians are actively fighting with Ukrainian forces. So you have to go south, then go west, and then go up again. And so it's a very challenging road, and you have to have the skills to know where you're going.
Having lived in the country off and on since 2009, he speaks fluent Russian and Ukrainian. So far, he's been able to dodge the danger using Twitter and a network of friends and safe houses, but he's very much aware that Putin's army has attacked and killed reporters, including members of the Fox News team.
It makes sense that Russians are shooting and targeting journalists because they target them in their own country. So, I mean, you have journalists that are murdered in their own country, the top journalists. So, of course, in a war zone, it would make sense because all the Kremlin does is say, we didn't do that. Those were Ukrainian forces, so they lie. And they lie and they deny and lie. I keep myself safe by praying every day and making sure that I am as smart as possible about where I go.
Although he admits the constant sights and sounds of war have taken a toll on his mental health, he is inspired by the will of the Ukrainians to use anything and everything they have to defend their country.
When I'm on the streets, and there's very few places in this country where I have not been, and what the Ukrainians will tell you is that we will die to our last human being before we are slaves to Russia. That's the language that they use when they talk, when I communicate with them.
Starr grew up on Detroit's West Side, a graduate of Northwestern High School, a journalism major in college, who became a Fulbright scholar on the issues of international politics and race, something he also sees in Russia's attempt to justify the invasion.
It's interesting how Russian President Vladimir Putin talks about Ukrainians and Russians are brothers, and he pretty much denies them of their own agency to exist as human beings. I mean, he talks about them like they're white trash, and I think that's something that we in America, we understand that slur, how you talk about white, like white people who we feel are kind of beneath, societal norms or whatever, but that's how Putin talks about Ukrainians. And so when and it's very similar to kind of the white supremacist language and framework of how white folks talk about Black people in the United States is a very similar parallel. And so he starts with the dehumanization. And so, of course, I can bomb you and I can kill your children and I can kill your elderly and I can bomb maternity wards because you're not really full human beings anyway.
And despite reports of recent progress in negotiations between both sides, Starr believes the solution won't be quick or easy. So how long do you think this will last? How will it end?
It depends on a number of factors: the Russian people, the Russian economy, the number of body bags that are coming in, and logistically how the Russians will be able to operate here. Because an occupation is not going to happen. I'll tell you that that's not going to happen. Mark my words on that. That's not going to happen. They don't have the money. They don't have the resources. It would take 1 million Russians to occupy this country efficiently. 1 million, and that's not going to happen because they don't have that many people.
Thanks to Terrell Starr for his courageous reporting for the War Zone. He and I actually spent an hour talking about the situation. You can watch that full conversation at fox2detroit.com. That's our website, and of course my Facebook page as well. Now let's meet our panel. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell is here. Lawyer professor, retired brigadier general, expert in national security, Michael McDaniel is back. Businessman, logistics expert, and retired lieutenant colonel, Andrew Rocky Wichkowski. But I want to start this segment with Roman Baranovich, because tonight, Roman, your wife is in Ukraine fighting against the Russian invasion. What made her decide to go?
Yeah. What made her decide to go? Well, it's pretty straightforward, even though yet very complicated. And that is that she is Ukrainian American. She was born in Kyiv. I worked there for a long time. I retired. My kids, one is in Toronto, one is in Washington. Her kids, our kids. She said she was going to stay. She'd be able to fly back and forth, stay with her parents, and that's how it was supposed to be until this disaster happened, this unbelievable craziness. And she now cannot get out because her parents refused to go. Her parents refused to go because her brother was conscripted. Her sister is EMS, so she is not allowed to leave the country as well. And Vika goes basically, if they're not going, and my parents are not going, I'm staying too.
But we're hearing that the bombs are falling everywhere, though. Are they safe? How far away are they from danger?
They are in the city center of Kyiv. Kyiv city center is still relatively calm. It's the outskirts that are really being devastated. Yet it's still a very tenuous and unpredictable situation, and yeah, we are very concerned.
I know you are, and I can't imagine the conversation that you and your family had with your wife before she left.
Well, my daughter,
Meanwhile,
in fact, is trying to convince her to leave, and she's on a daily, they call daily, they're very tight. And my daughter said to her, or my wife said to my daughter, if this was me, where grandma is, refusing to leave, would you abandon me? And my daughter called me crying, saying, how do I answer that? And I said, you can't. That's the way she is. She's a hero. She's relentless. She's the way she is, and that's where we're at, and that's life. And she's unbelievable.
Well, Congresswoman Dingell, today Congress voted for yet another round of sanctions against Russia. We have leveled sanction after sanction against Putin, the oligarchs. But the question tonight is, are those sanctions working? Are they sufficient to end this war?
Well, Putin is definitively feeling the pain. And I think one of the things that you really have to note is how together the allies, the United States and countries around the world have been in sending a message to Putin about this war that is unjustified and is causing a threat to democracy around the world and causing very significant humanitarian crisis in countries around the world. We have no choice but to put those economic sanctions on, and we need to continue to make sure that he is feeling pain. We're walking a very thin line here, Huel, of not wanting to put boots on the ground, not wanting to go to war with Russia, because the consequences of this escalating out of control very quickly and what those consequences would be are terrifying. So we must all, I hope that as Americans, we will stay united in fighting for the Ukrainian people and for democracy around the world. And we need to understand how complicated all of this is.
General McDaniel, the president has so far refused to impose a no-fly zone. He has refused to send Polish jets via American bases to Ukraine. He is, though, sending some shoulder-fired missiles and some high-tech drones. Is that enough?
I candidly don't think it's enough. The Russians will continue to escalate, and we have to continue to respond. We have to do that in a unified fashion with NATO, with our allies, and we have to do that in a very deliberate manner. So I would think at some point, and I think there are probably already ongoing discussions about fighter jets from Ramstein Air Force Base from Poland originally to Ukraine. It is the only difference between the missiles that we are giving is it is a crew served platform as opposed to an autonomous platform that can be handed off. So there's some logistics there, but I would suspect that we're having discussions on that already. I don't see a nationwide no-fly zone. To do so means we have to hit air defense missile sites in Belarus and Russia to truly make the airspace safe. That would be seen as an escalation by us, by many. I would think, however, that there will come a day when humanitarian assistance will require protection, including air cover. From the U.S. and from NATO or other Western countries. That's difficult to do and to do in a limited fashion, but I could see that being needed at some time in the future. We see Russia, their entire offensive has bogged down. They have committed 55% of their entire military to Ukraine. They don't have a lot of military troops they can put into this, so they're using mercenaries, including from Syria. And I think that we'll see a reaction by Russia similar to what we saw Russians do in the Chechen region when that bogged down, and start doing a city by city leveling of civilian infrastructure and population. That is war crimes under the Geneva Convention, under the additional protocols of 1977. At some point, we will have to react to that. They are clearly already committing war crimes, as we saw with the attack on the theater and hospitals, including maternity hospitals earlier. And I think that there will continue to be a world coalesced against Putin and the Russian military.
Meanwhile, the news is not all bad. When we come back here on Let It Rip, we're going to talk about the generosity of Americans across the country and here in Metro Detroit to help the people of Ukraine as Let It Rip continues. Welcome back to Let It Rip. We're talking about Ukraine and what we as a nation should do to help the people overseas and to hopefully end the war. And Rocky, you're a former soldier, but right now you're leading another effort, and that is to get supplies to the people of Ukraine.
Yeah, today actually and I apologize for the way I'm dressed, but tonight and today we just finished packing 28 pallets that are going by air this weekend actually. And it's not just Ukrainians, Ukrainian of American descent. It's Polish Americans, Baltic Americans, Romanian Americans, Hungarian Americans, and most importantly, Americans. We're all Americans. I've got American veterans that have shown up to a warehouse in Hamtramck, and we're packing because Ukraine stood with America during 9/11. And I'm talking with a friend of mine who happens to be a colonel and a doctor, and he's on the front lines in the Western District of Ukraine. And he told us, this is what we need. And I got to tell you that hospitals, doctors, all types of individuals, corporations, throughout all of Southeast Michigan came together and coalesced and brought all types of material, medical equipment, non-lethal military equipment, helmets, some police stations, without me specifically, they asked not to be identified, but some police stations that had level 4 vests and plates that were no longer accepted or acceptable to wear here in the United States because of expiration dates, said, here, take this, because otherwise we have to throw this out and destroy this. So the generosity of Americans is unbelievable. Let's remember, we've got a lot of humanitarian crisis. We've got a crisis on our southern border. We've had Haiti, we've had Afghanistan, we've had the Middle East, and the generosity of Detroit, metropolitan Detroiters has been unbelievable. This time, no different.
And yet, Debbie, people are still dying in Ukraine. There was a theater in Mariupol, clearly marked with a sign in Russian that said that children are here. And yet that theater was bombed by Putin's army. President Biden has called Putin a war criminal. Do you agree?
He is a war criminal. What we are seeing happening to the people in Ukraine is so outrageous. But I also want to say to you that quite frankly, military strategy should at times not be played out in newspapers, cable television, or as much as I love you,
totally
Hugh,
agree.
It doesn't, our strategy should not be here. And there are many discussions. Our allies, our NATO has never been more together. You are looking at some countries who were concerned about this. And I'll tell you something else. Our intelligence agencies knew what was happening. They outperformed every other country, and the NATO countries are saying that now. Those are analysts. Those aren't Republicans or Democrats. They are American, well-trained professional analysts that are doing everything they can to keep us safe. We are in very dangerous times right now. And 1.5 to 2 million Ukrainians have left the country. And you know, when they go into Poland, mothers pull up in cars and put up signs or hold up fingers to say, how many children can they take into their families? And I know what, Rocky, I've been working with my communities to try to, everybody wants to help. One of the things we were told yesterday is there are 1,500 children in Ukraine that are being treated for cancer who's chemotherapy. There's no chemotherapy available there.
And Debbie, we want to, and I'll say from the Polish community, and if I can speak, Roman, from the Ukrainian community, the Americans here that are from ethnic heritage, we want to thank you, by the way. And there was a pallet that specifically went out to that oncology center for children and the oncology center today. Thank you, by the way.
No, we're all working this together. Yeah. But not everything we have to reveal on Let It Rip. And I'm normally like to let it rip.
And I agree with you, but I have to say that Debbie, to underscore exactly what Debbie said, our intelligence services really get a hat tip here today and every day, because our intelligence services, they gave a wake-up call to China and Russia when we intercepted communications, or we have communications that basically said that China was ready to help get Russia out of this demise with MREs, which are meals ready to eat, to help Russian soldiers with meals on the ground, with weapons, and with other things to help their military. And we uncovered also, our intelligence services were the ones that found out that Russia was hiring mercenaries from Syria, the Syrian military. By the way, not a great military, but I think the Ukrainians will destroy them on the ground like they're destroying the Russians. And Roman, God bless your people, because your people are fighting hard for freedom. You're creating a great testament for all people across this world to stand up to tyranny.
Roman, you and your wife and your family is indeed, all of them, inspirational. But can you give us some gauge of the situation there now? We've heard that the Ukrainians had made some advances, that in many parts of the country, they were killing far more Russian troops than they were losing in their own ranks. Are you hearing that same thing?
Yes, I am. I'm a Ukrainian American. I was born here in Detroit. My wife is Ukrainian, born in Kyiv, just to be clear. But yes, it's inspirational. They are resilient people. As divided as they are politically, they know how and when to come together. And what's amazing, my wife, in staying in Kyiv, decided to form, she was very active during 2014 when the first Donbass wars took place. And she had NGO, and she had vehicles going out there. Now what she decided with her colleagues, they formed soup kitchens, which are basically hot food kitchens. So everybody has a role. And it's not a role that's assigned, it's a role that they all kind of kind of, they go to where their strengths are, and they all, no one sits around and does nothing, you know, and it's no one's forced to do anything. They bunker down in the same place when they have to bunker down. If they can't go back to their apartments, they 3 hot meals a day for the volunteer forces and the regular forces. Everybody, my sister-in-law, Oksana, doesn't do EMS. She's not feeling that she's forced to stay to do medical services. She wouldn't have it any other way. It's just they know what, and of course, because it is their country, it motivates them a lot more than it does some poor Russian soldier who doesn't understand why he showed up in Kiev in the first place, or near Kiev in the first place.
They were lied to.
Can I just say, Roman, I got a video today from one of my Polish brothers that showed me, and by the way, I'm proud of my heritage as well. I've got to tell you, the heart, the open doors and the hearts to the Ukrainian brothers and sisters. But they showed a video of a tank column as well as an armored personnel column going through an area north of Mariupol, and it was a woman that actually came out with an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade, and stood her ground and took out the first vehicle. And when she set the example, the men charged the entire column and they destroyed the entire Russian column. And it was the women that are standing and fighting just as bravely as the men.
There's a number of...
Rocky, I want to see that video. We need to see that video here.
Ken, your producer actually has it. I sent it to him. He's got it.
Good.
I was just going to remark,
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to remark on what Rocky said. There are a number of studies on insurgencies, and one of the things that is required, besides coalescing around an ideology, but one of the things that's absolutely required for a successful insurgency, that the women are involved, because the women are sort of the moral fiber of a society, including one that is being rent by outside forces, as we see here. So Roman's point about his wife, his sister-in-law, and as Rocky said, is very, very telling there of the strength of the spirit of the Ukrainian people. And it just, I think we should all take an example from that. The other point I just want to make to follow up on what Rocky and Debbie said was that we're seeing the incompetency of the Russian intelligence as well as other incompetencies as well. You know, their encrypted system is down for battlefield communications, is down because it relied on 3G towers. Well, they took out all the Ukrainian towers, which they needed themselves. So they're using open source, whether, you know, radio and other forms. So our intelligence gets better every single day, and we're sharing it among the allies and between the US and the Ukrainians and others on just a countless basis. And based upon that alone, we're able to track and be successful as to where any Russian forces may be.
You know, the other thing I would say is that the Russians were not told the truth about why they went into Ukraine.
Right.
There's been a real demoralization among the troops. You've seen the courage of more Russians than you've ever seen, speaking up and speaking out. The president's threatening to arrest them. So the people, I mean, Putin has had this hold on the Russian people, this fear. And that fear right now is not as there as present as it has been in times past. And many of the Russian, the number of deaths of mothers that have seen their sons die in this war is also having an impact on the people of Russia.
You're right, Debbie. How many Russians can Putin and his henchmen actually poison with radiation or uranium or radium? And how many of them can he throw out of the window? Can he throw out 15,000 Russians?
As one TV producer did on the air, on state Russian TV,
that's right,
holding up that sign, no war, they're lying to you. And she also said, they can't put all of us in prison. I think she's right. There are heroes rising up everywhere. Panel, we appreciate your comments. Hopefully, time for final thoughts coming up. Final thoughts, beginning with Roman. Go.
One thing about President Zelensky, who when he was an actor, a comedic actor who had a TV show in which he played a president of Ukraine, and it was very farcical, and he was funny. He's always been funny. And when he was elected, it was a very mixed bag. Half the population didn't like him and thought, what can he possibly do? He's a comic actor. Well, he has surpassed everybody's expectations in the world and locally in Ukraine. Even the president who was before him, very antagonistic relationships, they now have come together. A hero is a hero, and it's always obvious, and he is one.
And strangely enough, the situation in Ukraine is bringing Americans together as well. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for watching. Let it rip.